many of you were here for Shine Bright at Christmas time? Oh, and how many of you were not here? A lot more of you. Well, you are not going to be sorry you came tonight. I guarantee it. It is just so great to get to know Lacey. Every time we do this interview, I feel like I get to know you better and better each time. And I just want to, before we begin, just ask you, for these ladies need to know, how are you doing? You are a busy girl. You have got, your two little ones and you're married, but you are writing music and touring and speaking and doing all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
How have you been?
Well, it's an adventure with Jesus. For really, it's really one day at a time and trying to remember to be present, and so it's busy, but hopefully we're appreciating the moments we do have, and being present, and that's hard to make yourself do sometimes, but
yes, but
I'm glad to be here. So I'm trying to be.
Yeah, we are glad you're here too.
Me.
You shared something the other day about your little guy.
Yeah, my little 4-year-old.
Yes, tell us about that.
We talked 2 nights ago, and he was crying. He was like, "Mom, come get me," because he's at his grandma's, and he's been there for 5 days now. And he's like, "You're not gonna come get me, are you?" And I was brokenhearted, and I said, Mommy's gonna go tell these ladies that Jesus loves them, and if you let Mommy go tell them about Jesus, then Jesus is gonna bless you and give you a special blessing for that. And he said, "Okay, you tell the ladies that Jesus loves them and don't disobey Jesus, and then you come get me." And I said, "Okay," and I'm proud of you.
Oh, it's amazing. It's like through the eyes of a child. He's got his priorities right. Tell them what Jesus wants them to know, and then come and get me. Oh, Lacey, you're a good mom.
I love him a lot.
You're just an absolute miracle. When I read your book the first time, I would cry as I would read of your childhood because it was so sad, so hard. I mean, you have a way of expressing yourself that is really special. You really bring us, if you have not read Lacey's book, you must pick up a copy and read it for yourself, because I could be present with you in the circumstances as you were experiencing them as a young girl. And I was refreshing myself on the details of your story, which, really were unforgettable. They really made an impression on me the first time. And as I read over them again, from the very beginning of your life, the moment you were born, the situation, the scene in the hospital that you paint for us in the book, if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit what that was like.
Yeah. Well, my mom was 15 when she had my brother, and she'd had complications when she delivered him, and then 16 when she had me, and they had counseled her not to have another baby, to have an abortion. So she kind of went against their advice, and it was really scary. When I was born, we both almost died, and so, but God rescued us, and my grandmother was there, and she was trying to make sure everybody was taking care of my mom, and she was cussing the nurses out and, telling them how they needed to take care of her. And, she was
in
really
her own
passionate.
way trying to be helpful. Yes.
But sometimes, our prayers in our most desperate place, even no matter where we are, sometimes we just cry out to God. And I remember my grandma said in the end, she just cried out to God. And I talked to her about it not too long ago, actually.
Is that right?
And she had said, "I just cried out to God, and this nurse actually came to me." I didn't write about this because she just told me this. She's like, "This nurse actually came to me and said, 'Honey, you need to pray, and I've already prayed for your daughter.'" And
wow.
She was crying. I'm like, "Okay."
And this came back to her just recently, and
she
told you about it.
Well, we talked about it recently.
You didn't mention the fact how old your mom was and how old your grandmother was.
My grandmother was 29 when I was born, so she was young.
She's probably my age.
Yeah.
She probably is. And your mom she was 16 when you were born?
16 when I was born.
Yeah.
Grandma was 13 when she had her.
And this was your mom's you were the second baby she had. You had a little brother who was 10 months older than you were. I mean, seriously, the childhood and the home into which you were born, I don't think you would mind me saying that it was really a situation of poverty, right? I mean, you were really poor. And with your mom being just 16 and having a little baby already, and then you were a miracle because you were 2 months premature. And so you were released from the hospital miraculously, really, like days after you were born, which is like so surprising. But you had sort of a failure to thrive or something, and they ended up inserting a feeding tube in you. And then what happened with your mom? She was here, a 10-month-old and a baby, and she's 16. I can't imagine. I remember I was 18 when my oldest was born, and I just sort of felt like, I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like I'm going to break. I'm going to do everything wrong. And at 16, it's just unimaginable to have two, and then to have to grapple with a feeding tube and a little girl who was just so tiny, tiny.
Yeah, so she decided that it would be best to put us in foster care and put me in foster care for that year while I was recovering.
Yeah, your mom
That was a hard decision for her.
A really hard decision for her. And, as you were born into all of this, you used a phrase that I think was pretty amazing. You said, in the chaos, God was working. And you also used this term, you said, better means less. And so in that world where you were growing up, where you may not have had enough food to eat, at times you were dependent on the charity of others, you learned some really amazing lessons that you've carried with you through your life, haven't you?
Yeah.
What do you mean by better means less?
Well, it's that it's in the hard times that you really know who you are, and you really find out what faith means, and you find out we feel like we're in control of everything, and it stresses us out and makes us heavy and all this, because the truth is, when life happens, circumstances beyond your control, then you realize, I'm not really in control, and I have to depend on God. And just it makes you realize, who you are. And
it runs so counterculture and counterintuitive to say something like better means less, or that in the chaos God is working, because Jesus said a lot of the same things. He said, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are those who are poor in spirit. And the promises that he makes and the lessons that can be learned in those places, I think there's a lot of women today that are in situations or fearing to end up in a situation like that. But you can say that even in the midst of the chaos, that God can be very present. And
he is more present. It feels more present, because you just have to say, well, there's nothing I can do. Yeah. So what else can he do? And it's funny because when you come from a place of faith and belief in God, you see how he worked. But when you come from a place of not believing, you almost say, you get caught up on how hard it was, and you miss the fact that you got through it.
So there's that blessedness.
It's funny because my mom was she was not a complainer. Like, she was always like, see how he helped us.
That's awesome. She was one of, even though you had your issues with your mom later on, especially as you were going into your teen years, you were blessed with a mother who, despite the fact that she was just a human being and made mistakes, that God really used her to instill in you some really valuable lessons. He also used another woman in your life that you mentioned for such a brief moment in your book, and her name was Maureen. And you said this in your book, that she came to you at a time when you were being bullied at school, and it was really intense, and so you would talk about this with her a lot. She was a safe place for you to open up, and she says to you that she told you the story of the ugly duckling, and then she said, Lacey, you are so beautiful, but sometimes it's hard for others to see past the outside or to see the potential for the future. But one day you will be a lovely swan, and everyone will notice your beauty. But because you were once thought to be an ugly duckling, you will be able to see the beauty in others that the world thinks unlovely, and you will be the one telling them that they are beautiful, the way I am telling you. I know, because I was an ugly duckling too.
Yeah.
And it's just so counterintuitive to have somebody who has suffered, and you think, well, no, we should fix that suffering, we should stop that, no one should feel that way about themselves. But as she processed that and came through it, she was able to see in you, when you were going through what she was going through in that phase, you hadn't come to discover you were a beautiful swan yet, but she spoke that into your life, and what an amazing gift that was to you at that time.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because we don't see how the suffering is important for who we turn out to be. And I think about, there's a lady I met last night who has a daughter. She says she's deep and she's complex, and I just think that your book's going to help her. Yeah. And I'm just not sure if I always have the right resources for her. And I just wanted to encourage her, because I'm like, listen, God knows who she's gonna be, and he's trusted you and picked you to be her mother. And I think about my own mother and how, I knew that she could have put me up for adoption later on. I knew the story, and I would often think, well, why didn't you do that? Things would be a lot easier. It was hard. Right. But it was something that God picked my mom to be my mom. He knew where I would end up. He knew the glory that could come. And so he didn't shield us from the suffering. Yeah. It was like, he's like, the suffering is going to produce your character. It's going to produce wisdom. It's going to produce that strength. And, it's like he was with us the whole time, like helping us through it.
That's so amazing. It's so encouraging, because we get stuck in the midst of our mess, and we can't see beyond the corner. We can't see around the corner, and we're just thinking, God, where are you in all of this? Yeah. But like you said, in the chaos, God is working. If you will entrust your life to him, and you will just place your faith in him, continue to do that next thing, that God can work miracles, and he did in your life. But you were beginning this journey as a young person. You had this bright light in your mother and in Maureen, but then you experienced something so tragic, and obviously God allowed this tragedy. You didn't cause it, didn't will it to happen, but it happened. Right. And you were in 5th grade when you were picked up at school by your stepfather,
and he told me that that my cousin, who was like a little brother to me, his mother was a teen mom, and she lived with us when she had him. And he was the same age as my own little brother, who's 3. My stepfather told me when he picked me up from school that Kelly was dead. And later I found out that he was beaten to death by his stepfather. And just processing that and that age really put me in a position where I had to either think that God was terrible or there was no God. And I, on my own, trying to process, and I just decided there was no God, and stopped believing. And
it produced in you a sadness and a grief that was so profound and deep. I mean, I'm thinking, you were how old? You were in 5th grade? 10 years old. But obviously, you were created with a certain disposition and temperament and artistic, perhaps a melancholy side. Yeah. But you went so deep into grief and so deep into anger that it turned into hatred, and it was hard for you to process anything outside of that. Anyone who was happy, anyone who was enjoying beauty or enjoying life or laughter, you felt that in order to honor this little boy's life, that you willed yourself to be sad. Yeah. In his memory, in honor of him. Yeah. And that's hard to understand in such a little girl, 5th grader. I can't.
Yeah. It was funny, because when I was writing the book, I was really trying to to go back and remember that first moment when I made that decision. And I do remember it being very conscious of like, a song came up, and it was at the time, it was the same song I'd heard at the funeral. And I thought, is this supposed to be comforting, or is this supposed to send me into a meltdown? And I asked myself in my head, which way am I gonna go? And I thought, I have to honor him. I can't, I have to mourn for him. And so I decided I would mourn in that moment. And it was amazing that thinking that God would help me remember that moment, like when it began to I began to look for sad things and just to stay sad for him, and being distrustful towards people who are happy, because the world's messed up, and either you're naive or you're messed up to be happy in a world that's so messed up. Yeah.
Right. That the choice is either to be in denial of the reality of the world in which we live in, or to go deep, deep, deep into it and feel the tragedy of it and never come out of that. You found yourself with those two choices. You don't realize that there was a third choice.
Yes.
That there's a third way to process grief, and
Yes.
that's not to deny it. That's to see it for what it is, but to turn it into a prayer, turn it into the thing that God wants it to become,
Right.
and use it in your life, which he did ultimately. But you wrote that that at his funeral, this was so amazing to read how you felt. You said that you looked into his coffin. That was this little beautiful boy surrounded by his toys and his Ninja Turtle stuff, and when you went to kiss him, you wrote that it felt like you were kissing a sidewalk in winter, and that's what you knew when you knew what death was. That's profound, Lacey. I mean, there's a lot of people today, a lot of adults today, that have never had to experience that, and death is a tragedy. And Jesus wept at the tomb of Lazarus. It's not like something that we can just brush off lightly and say, well, he's with Jesus.
No.
And he was with Jesus.
I didn't understand.
But there was a
that
place
either,
there was a place for sadness, but not to be consumed by it.
Because I felt like bodies, we're our bodies. You know what I mean? Like as a 10-year-old, you're your body. But in that moment, I knew this body was not my cousin. It was just a body.
Yeah.
And I understood that was just a shell, of who he was, and that he wasn't there.
Yeah.
And if he's not there and that's his body, then it feels like a really unstable place we live in.
Yeah.
It just was scary.
Yeah, I'm sure it was really scary. You said that you remember, you couldn't remember a time where you were not crying yourself to sleep every night, and you had this hate and this anger and this grief. And what state were you in mentally through those years? Was it progressive? Was it just, it began in fifth grade and it just continued on?
Yeah, I remember it was that same year I started to write down the negative things that people told me about myself.
Oh, wow.
It is a weird thing to do, but it was part of that. It was from the enemy. Like, I'm sure the enemy taught me to do that,
Because you were holding on to all the dark things and all the sad things.
Because the Bible says that we're to meditate on whatever's pure and lovely and righteous and, good. We're supposed to meditate on those things. And so the devil, he can only pervert what God says to do. So he taught me in that way how to meditate on everything that was negative and ugly and sad. And it's really, I was teaching myself almost how to be depressed, how to meditate on those things.
Right.
And that was very destructive in every way. Never could see the good in other people anymore because I was looking for the bad. So
life became pretty awful at this point for you. You were going into your teen years. I'm sure that's a rough time for a girl to be processing all of those emotions. But here you are, angry and hateful and hating anybody who was happy and beautiful and enjoying life. You felt that it was shallow and stupid and, that they were living in some sort of a fantasy world. They weren't dealing with reality like you were. But at some point you became self-destructive. You said that at one time you burned a smiley face into your hand.
Yeah.
Was there something in the pain, something in the...
I think what
act
it
of doing that was helpful to you?
well, no, it's not helpful at all. But in the end, the logic behind in your head, I guess, is that when you are constantly fighting and you're constantly in violent situations, right? Like violently, and we fought, like there was fighting all the time going on around me. And I was always fighting. And if there was no fighting, I would actually like stir things up without even realizing I'm doing it and like pick fights. And it's almost like I got addicted to the chemicals that get released in your brain whenever
Yeah.
you're hurt physically or
Angry?
that violent happens. Yeah.
Rage?
And so when nothing's happening, you get so like addicted to the strong feelings that you're numb when nothing's happening. And it makes you like feel so empty and just so that hurting yourself makes that release happen again, I think, in your head where you feel more like in your normal space, which it's very destructive. I feel like it also is very spiritually destructive. I think it opens you up to attacks like from the enemy that is just, tears you up inside, So
But
it doesn't help really.
The one thing that you said in your book that kept you sort of a little bit grounded was feeling, that it was up to you to sort of be responsible and to care for your little brothers and sisters. That you were 6 now in the family?
There are 6 of us,
6
yes.
children at this point, and all living, in this tiny little house and trying to make, ends meet, and your mom's trying to get an education. I mean, she really was trying to do what she could do to help you. And yet, here you are in this position to where you're bearing the burden of trying to protect and keep your little ones, your little brothers and sisters going, but at the same time, so filled with anger and hate. I mean, you must have been really difficult to live with at this time.
I liked kids. I loved kids. It's funny. Yeah, and we did fight a lot. I had a lot of bitterness, I felt like, towards things about my mom, like normal, but then also just the circumstances I didn't understand about what she was going through. I didn't understand.
Yeah, talk about that for just a minute. Now that you're a mom yourself and you have some years and some perspective on that, there are girls here maybe that are thinking about their moms and saying, yeah, she's just totally doesn't understand me.
Yeah.
She's, always on my case. All she sees is the negative in me and the feelings of hatred. I mean, I can understand how hard that is for the daughter, but at the same time, now that you look back as a mom, how do you feel about your mom? How do you feel about those years when you were so angry and fighting and raging at her?
I love my mom so much, and I just am amazed at some of the things when I look back that she was able to handle. And she inspires me because she was always so strong. I barely ever saw her cry. Like I said, she's not a complainer, but the thing is, she's also very hard, just very wanted us to be strong and very harsh in some ways to make us strong or whatever, and didn't want us to be naive but.
Yeah, I remember when you were writing about the death of your little, is he your cousin? That some of the adults, your granny was trying to shield you from it, not tell you really what had happened, but your mom she just told you flat out what had happened.
Yeah.
So she really was feeling that was the best way to prepare you, was to just let you
and that's
know
how she
the
was
truth.
with everything. I never didn't know. I mean, it was always like that. I mean, my mom always talked to us like we could comprehend those things, and that, I appreciate that about her, and I try to keep that on with my son. Like we said, I tell him what's going on, and but the thing is, what I didn't realize when I was younger that I think would have been helpful is to look and to understand that my mom she's a person. She has a history I don't know about. She has things that she hides from me so she can be strong for me. She's dealing with struggles too. She's upset with herself when she makes mistakes, but she's still trying to maintain, her presence as a mother, and she wants to do better than she can. and she makes mistakes, and she needs grace. And
That's so beautiful. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, kudos to you for saying that, and to all the moms out there that are second guessing themselves, when things are not easy with their kids.
Yeah.
It's like, it's hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's hard to be a mom
It
sometimes.
is hard. But it's there's
she was
grace.
resilient. She was resilient.
Yeah.
I mean, and she did raise you guys as the best she could. She knew how to do it. I mean, she really was trying to. She was going to school. She was working. She was trying to parent you, and
Yeah.
then it just got really hard.
Mm-hmm.
You had these little brothers and sisters, and your mom is, trying to make things work, but you're causing a lot of drama. So what does she end up doing?
There's a lot of drama in general, and I was
Yeah.
definitely in the middle of it. But yeah, the police were called to her house several times because there was so loud fighting and screaming, and she said, they both said that they thought it would be better if I went and lived somewhere else, and so I went and lived with my grandmother in Mississippi. Me and my older brother actually went and lived there.
Wow.
It was really hard to do that, and I had my little brother's dad, who was like a dad to me, the closest thing I had to that at the time. I was really hard for me to leave my brothers and sisters, and he said, sometimes you can't help somebody until you help yourself, and
Wow.
you need to get better.
So he sent you to live with Granny.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she was quite an amazing person as
She
well.
is amazing.
I know. Someday I would love to meet your mom and your grandmother. But she sends you to live with Granny, and it's okay for a while, right?
I mean, it's always okay when things change and it's new,
Yeah. And
but
then
then
it
you're still
settles
there with
back.
yourself.
Yeah, you
You know,
brought
you're
yourself
running-
with you. The change of environment didn't change the inside of you,
It's
inside
true.
of Lacey. So you're back in school, and you're dealing with all of that, and your grandmother is trying to cope with you, wild thing, and and then you have your grandfather has a heart attack, and
Yeah.
how does that impact you?
Well, he was such a source of stability in our lives, and for him to have a heart attack was, besides the fact that I was always looking for something sad and drama, anyway, it was really hard for me to think about him, in the hospital and maybe not making it and all that. And my grandmother was upset and trying to explain to me in a loud voice about how my actions were impacting the house. She's like, you're not obeying our rules, you're disrespecting us, you're getting in trouble at school, you're doing things that are illegal, and there's so much stress here. And what she was trying to say was, you need to think about more people than just yourself. And that's really good advice for depression, actually, and to actually look outside yourself and see how you can serve other people, and just see what you
Yeah.
can do to help. If you don't want to live, then live your life to help others. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there's something you can do to help.
Yes.
You know what I mean? There's people who you can serve and love, but she's trying to wake me up, but I twisted what she said because I was looking for an excuse to take my life for a while.
You had been having this inflicting pain on yourself grew to such a point where it was more than just wanting to hurt. You wanted to end your life. You wanted to die.
Yeah.
How old were you?
Well, I started thinking about that when my cousin died. And I always wondered why he was dead and I was alive. It just felt unfair. I wanted to, I wanted to suffer with him, kind of. I know it's kind of but my cousin, like you said, he's with Jesus and he's full of joy, and he would never have wanted me like that. It's not really honoring who he was. It's really just a knee-jerk reaction to something that I should have probably learned how to heal from.
Right.
And then never did. So I had suicidal thoughts since then.
Yeah, and then you were, were at school one day, and you felt that, I think you said in your book that because your your brothers and sisters were one reason. Like that was kind of what was keeping you going, kind of gave you a reason to live. Then you were moved away from them, no longer had that. And then your grandmother says you're causing so much drama that it's actually putting your grandfather under stress. He has this heart attack. You decide this is it.
Yeah, I twisted what she said into saying life would be better without you. And so I thought, okay,
Wow.
well, I'll take my life. But that's what she was saying, because if my grandfather was only stressed over me because he loved me, and it would not have done anybody any good if I had taken my life. It would have done the opposite, obviously, more stress, which was just a lie that I couldn't let go of. It's not true, and I made that an excuse. So a lot of times people that are suicidal, they're looking for an excuse, and it doesn't necessarily mean that that one thing was actually the cause. There's other things that contribute, I believe, to us. Not part of it is that we don't know that we have a purpose outside of whatever's right in front of us. So
Yeah. It was really helpful to read this book for me because I could see it so clearly through your eyes. I could see how in your mind and in your place in life and the age that you were, how all of this made sense to you. There was a certain logic to it all, but you didn't believe in God. You didn't believe there was a reason to go on. You had no reason. Your brothers and sisters, your grandfather, everything was just, so you decide that day you're going to kill yourself and you go to school, but you encounter some girl at school, and it is so random when you think about, you're going to school to say goodbye to your friends because you're going to end your life that night. And so instead of you getting around to saying goodbye to people, you run into one of those happy people that you hated.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. She was so kind, too. And after I became a Christian, I remember looking at her and just loving her so much and just being in awe of her joy and realizing she had actually been through a lot, that had come through with faith in God and hope on the other side. And lots of people actually that are happy have been through a lot.
Yes.
And so it was funny because I judged them as not having been through life, So it was me that was judgmental, so.
Yeah. So she comes up to you and she actually is trying to be nice. She says something to you. What did she say?
She touched my hair and she's like, "You have pretty hair." And I was like, "Don't touch my hair. All you care about is hair and nails and shoes and the outside, and you don't even know me. You don't know what's going on in me. And if my hair's pretty, then I don't want it." I took the scissors off the teacher's desk and went to the bathroom and cut off my hair. And I was,
So
the reason why that's a significant point is because it was the thing that actually set my grandmother when she saw me. So I ended up going.
It's almost like humorous in a way, it wasn't at the time, I'm sure, for you.
Well,
but God used something like that to trigger something in your grandmother.
Well, so I went home from school. She was supposed to be at the hospital with my grandfather. She was there. I walk in the door and she's looking at me. "What are you doing home?" And then she looks at me and she's like, "What did you do to your hair?" She's like, "Something is wrong with you. You need to go to church. We're going to go to church tonight." And so that was my punishment, I guess, for skipping school.
So your plans are thwarted, or at least in your mind they're postponed.
Yeah.
And you have to go to church. She basically drags you to church.
By my messed up hair, yeah.
With your messed up hair.
Sort of. No.
And I love this about her. She takes you to the church, but instead of coming inside the church with you, she tells you to go inside, but she sits in her car in the big van right by the doors, so you can't get out.
Yeah.
You can't just ditch church. You have to go.
Church, yeah.
And another just amazing touch point that is God at work again, just like he's using this random comment by a girl about your hair, to cut your hair, to trigger your grandmother, to get you to church. You go to this church. And, in your book, you make it really clear that you hated most men. And you had seen abuse in men. And your mother had warned you about men. And you had turned and kind of, in your perception of them, you had no respect for men outside of maybe your grandfather. But you were reached through an older man. the gospel came through this man
Yeah.
to your soul.
Yeah, I think that's really awesome that God did it that way, because do you want me to tell about when he,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
I was, so the man started, the preacher started to begin to speak like I was the only one in the room telling my life story, and it was really strange to me to hear. I mean, I was like, I gotta get out of here, this is weird. And then he stops what he's talking about at the end and just starts crying. And he says, there's a suicidal spirit in the room. Please come up here and let us pray for you, because God has a plan for your life and he doesn't want you to die tonight. Wow. And I was like, there's no way I'm going up there in front of all these people. My pride wouldn't let me go.
It was your pride?
Yeah.
You knew he was talking to you. You knew that that the Spirit of God was speaking through him to you?
I didn't. I wouldn't have said that. I would have said, this is really weird and freaking me out, is all I would have said.
Okay.
But I'm definitely not going up there right now in front of all these people that are Christians that I've judged and hate, and I'm just not going. I was embarrassed to go. I was like, if I had done that, I would have already like broken apart everything that brought me to that place. And it just, for some reason, it's funny because, like I said, my pride wouldn't let me go publicly at that time.
Okay.
But when the service was dismissed, I went to the back to go out of the church, and there was another man standing there, a white-headed man, who looked at me with a purity of love that I'd never seen in a strange man's eyes before, and broke apart some judgments I'd had about how men look at women and how older, like, just disregarding the older generation, because I didn't have any old people in my life, older people. And he just looked at me with such love and purity. And I was just taken back by that. I was like, why are you looking at me like this? And he said, the Lord wants me to speak to you, and he wants you to know that even though you've never known an earthly father, that God will be a better father to you than any earthly father could ever be. Wow. And he's telling me this through these eyes of pure love, and through this man that I wouldn't have trusted a minute ago. And my first thought was, I don't need a dad. I don't need a man. And the very next thing he said was, and God has seen you when you cry yourself to sleep at night. And when he said that, it was like showing me how God had been my father all along. And he was there to put me to bed when no one was. And he was there, like, why did I fall asleep? It wasn't because I was stressed out and thinking about my pain. It's because God said, that's enough. You can sleep now. You know what I mean? He was with me, and he was showing me through these men that God would be a better father to me than any earthly father could ever be.
And that's amazing, isn't it? It's such a work of the Holy Spirit to open your eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you hadn't had that awareness of God or even of love. And that, really is a work of the Holy Spirit to open our eyes to truth, because we are so blinded many times by the god of this world who has lied to us, and we bought the lie and we believed the lie. And yet the Spirit of the Lord is more powerful.
Yes.
And the love that these men were able to convey to you in a way that you could understand it overwhelmed the power of the darkness and the power of the enemy and power of death in your life. And now you know so much about love, and you display it in your music, and you are being used by God. The gift that he gave you is not being wasted. It would have never been realized had you cut your life short. This incredible voice that you have, that you've written all these beautiful songs, and now you are on mission, really. Flyleaf and your new band, and the new music that you're writing, and the stuff that you're doing, the book that you've written is showing that your life has purpose and it has meaning beyond just being alive and enjoying being a mother and a wife. It's really to help other people. And I love what you said, that you are on mission with your life because you want to be available, you want to connect, and you want to have that common ground and share what you have been through firsthand, that you might tell somebody who feels alone and hopeless that they're really not alone and hopeless, that God has a plan for their lives. And for you, what would you say, Lacey? What does it mean for you now to be a wife and a mother, and you have daughter on your arm, to acknowledge that you are God's child. You're not here as by accident.
Right.
You know.
I think it's the most incredible journey to find out what it means to be the daughter of the King of the universe, the King of heaven.
Yeah.
It's an incredible journey
Yeah.
because he's such a good father.
Yeah.
And when we recognize it, all of life filtered through that. It's like when you love someone
Yeah.
and you know their faithfulness and you know that they always call you back or they always show up or they always fulfill their word and they always are doing good things for you
Yeah.
and they're always like doing better than you even think to ask. Then when they don't show up, you automatically know there's a reason because you know them. Because you know their character and you know they're faithful and you've seen so many good things.
Oh, it's
and
beautiful.
so when you look back and you see that faithfulness, it gives you hope, even in the hard things.
Yeah.
That there's a reason.
That's the title of your book, The
The
Reason.
Reason.
And
That's
I
right.
read this. You know, you're such an amazing writer. Really, I wanted to ask you if you would read something from your blog that you wrote the other day, and how you came home exhausted and laid down the bed, and grabbed your little guy who. Usually you said you have a million things to do. You would have normally, as he fell asleep in your arms, slipped your arm out from underneath him and just tiptoed out of the room and gotten busy with life. But you actually stayed in bed with him and allowed God to speak to you about the beauty of family, the beauty of your child and your husband. And so I printed this out. Would you read it for us?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It says, my heart ached with love for my family. My heart was overwhelmed with gratitude, the kind that makes you want to say, thank you, God, over and over like a crazy person. The kind of gratitude that makes you long for renewed commitment to priorities. I longed to give my life to my husband and my son and my new baby in that moment, like I longed to do in the moment when I said yes to Josh's question, will you marry me? The love and invitation was a match to the well of kindling in my heart, just waiting to burn for that purpose, to pour my heart, life, and energy into loving my husband and my children, to give everything I am to them with the greatest joy, a joy I can barely contain without bursting into tears and weeping with confessions and commitments that sound insane. Forever I will live my life to love you and to love our children however I can. It's the greatest joy I can imagine in life, to love you this way, with all that I have to offer and all that I am.
It's so beautiful, isn't it? Oh, thank you so much for...
Yeah, thanks for reminding me of that moment. Because we need
I know.
it.
You got to be careful what you put on the internet.
No, it's so important because we do have those moments. I think all of us have those moments. And just to remember those moments are the ones that are the true ones, you know,
Yes.
that we're connected with the true purpose.
Well, I think it so perfectly wraps your story because you began, you know, we were born into this family, born into your mother's world, suffered so much, saw such brokenness, was exposed to so much pain and heartache and suffering and hunger and poverty, all of the story that you've been through. The hatred that you once felt has been so filled up with love, and it just exudes. Lacey, when you sing and when you write, it just comes out of you. I mean, I think anyone who's ever listened to you or had the opportunity to spend a moment in your presence really does sense the love of God flowing out from you, not just because you've experienced it. It's so nice to be at peace within yourself, but because you want others to have that same peace. And so thank you for writing this book, and we're so excited with all that God is doing in your life. And you want to sing another song for us? Yay.
Yeah.
All right.
Here comes Josh. Thank you so much.